This is how you solve for the equation of a sine and cosine graph on a sinusoidal wave with a middle line. The equation for a sine or cosine graph of a sinusoidal wave with a middle line is y equals a sine b times x minus h plus k. So a stands for the height of the graph divided by 2. B is the multiplier of the graph, so the B stands for the multiplier or the frequency. H is the starting point of your graph, and K stands for the middle of the graph. With that equation in mind, y equals a sine b x times x minus h plus k, you will be able to find the sine and cosine equation. So to solve for a, you take the height of your graph and divide it by 2. So the height of the graph is, the low point of the graph is -5, and the high point is 1. So -5 to 1 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So your A will equal 3. Now for your B, you use the equation PB equals 2 pi. And P stands for the period of a cycle of a sinusoidal wave. So on this graph, we will use the period starting at -0.5 pi to 0.75 pi, and that's one full cycle. So -0.5 pi to 0.75 pi is 1.25 pi. So 1.25 pi b equals 2 pi. Now when you divide by 1.25 pi, the pi's cancel, then b is now 1.6 or 8/5. Since the sine graph starts here, that's your starting point. So since the starting point is between the full cycle of -0.5 to 0.75 pi, you will take 0.75 plus -0.5 and then divide that by 2, and you get, so right here I forget to put pi over 8 instead of 1/8. This is a sinusoidal wave, always use pi. Starting point, that is your h. Now you solve for your k, which is the middle point of the sinusoidal wave, and the middle point is -2. So now you have everything you need to solve for the sine equation, which is y equals a, so 3 sine, your b, which is 8/5 times x, and then your h, which is 1/8, so -1/8, and then your k, which is -2, so -2. And how you know whether your equation is negative or positive, your sine graph either starts going up, meaning positive, and if it's going down, it's negative. And for your cosine graph, if it starts at the top, it's positive. If it starts at the bottom, it's negative. So for the cosine equation, you use the same exact equation you used for the sine graph, but you replace sine with cosine. So y equals 3 cosine 8/5 times x and -2. Now to solve for the starting point, which is right here, you will have to use these 2 points, which is 1/8 and 3/4. So you will add 3/4 plus 1/8 to get, and then divide that by 2. So 3/4 plus 1/8 is 7/8, and 7/8 divided by 2 is 7/16. So now you have your h, and when you plug that in, it will be minus 7 pi over 16. And those are your two answers to the equation. But don't forget to add pi like I did, so pi over 8. And those are your two answers.
Alright, so now we're going to start on number 3. So as you can see here, I have the base equations for sine and cosine. So, starting off, we're going to find the a value that goes in front of the sine and cosine. So the a value, what we do is we take half of the total distance from the top to the bottom. So from -9 to 5, there's a total distance of 14. That divided by 2 is what the a value is, so we got 7. And then to know if 7 is positive or negative, we need to find the beginning points of each graph. So this one is the sine equation beginning point, and this one is cosine equation beginning point. So let's start with sine. When a sine equation starts going down from the beginning point, we know it's a negative. So we got -7. And then when cosine starts going up, we know that's a negative as well. So we got -7 there. If it was opposite and the sine started going up, it would be a positive, and if cosine started by going down, say if the beginning point was right here, it would be positive. But in this case, it's going to be negative. And then we're going to find the k value, which is the y value that is in the very middle of the graph. So in this case, you take either -9 and add 7, or 5 and subtract 7, and in both cases you get -2. It's basically halfway in between the graph. And now we're going to work to find our total distance between in one cycle of the graph. So when the graph peaks right here to when the graph peaks right here, that's one cycle, or one period. So the equation to find the b value, which is in the equation, and you need to help find your points, you're going to do PB equals 2 pi. So we're going to take the period, which we have to find by calculating it, and we are going to plug it into this equation to find the b value, so we can finish this equation and plug it in right here in both cases. So we're going to take this point, because we know this is -1.25 pi, or -5 pi out of 4, and this point because we know it's 3 pi out of 8, and that is half of a cycle, because right here to right here, that's not a full cycle. We need back to where the graph is similar in the cycle. All right, so we're gonna take the negative and positive does not matter here, so we're just gonna do 5 pi out of 4 plus 3 pi out of 8 to find half of the cycle and multiply it by 2. So 5 pi out of 4 can be written as 10 pi out of 8, just so we can get the common denominator, plus 3 pi out of 8. Scoot it up a little bit. There we go. Equals 13 pi out of 8. So we just found half of the cycle. To get a full cycle, we'll multiply that by 2, and we get 26 pi over 8. So now we found one period, or one cycle. So we take this number, and we're going to plug it into our PB equals 2 pi equation. So we have 26 pi over 8. We'll simplify that actually, and we'll go 13 pi over 4. B equals 2 pi. And then we're going to simplify, we're going to multiply by 4, we get 8 pi, and divide that by 13 pi. So we're going to get 8/13. B equals 8 out of 13. So now we found our b value. We can plug that in for each equation, 8 out of 13 and 8 out of 13. And now we need to do our last part of finding in the equation, which is finding the x, the initial starting point for each of these. So we already know from finding the b value when we were finding the period, this is negative 5 pi out of 4, and that is for the sine equation. So we can put x plus 5 pi out of 4 since that's the starting point. And then for the cosine graph, it's not as easy because there's not a clear point on this line that we can just look at. We have to calculate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add negative 5 pi out of 4 and 3 pi out of 8. And then we're going to divide that number by 2 to find what is in the very middle of them, which is this point. And that's going to help us find the cosine, help us finish the cosine equation. So we got negative 10 pi out of 8, which is just a extended version of negative 5 pi out of 4, plus 3 pi out of 8 equals negative 7 pi out of 8. And then we're going to take that negative 7 pi out of 8 and multiply it by 1/2. And we get negative 7 pi over 16. So this point right here, we know the x is negative 7 pi over 16. So now we can finish our cosine equation and put plus 7 pi over 16. And these are the two final answers right here.
And for the answers for number 2 and 4, here's number 2, and here's number 4. Thank you.